There are moments in life when you realize the people you trust most could be your greatest threat. For me, it happened under a velvet night sky, in the glittering silence of Greystone Island. My name is Anna Carlyle, and 3 days ago, I died, or at least my family hoped I did. They say betrayal hurts worst when it comes from blood. But nothing prepared me for the feeling of my own brother's hand, steady, ice cold on my back, shoving me off the deck of our family yacht into the dark, freezing water below. I heard Maya gasp, the sound sharp and fake as crystal. "Oh my God, Anna fell overboard!" I surfaced once, saw the blurred outline of Dylan and Maya, their faces twisted in something that looked like fear, but I knew better. Their plan was perfect, a private retreat, no witnesses, and a fortune worth killing for. Icy water burned my skin. The sky spun. In that moment, the world was nothing but panic, betrayal, and the taste of salt in my mouth. As the yacht's engine faded and their voices disappeared, I understood what true loneliness feels like when you're abandoned by the very people who promised to protect you. Most people drown in silence, their stories never told. But not me. Because when you've survived your own family's plan to erase you, you stop being afraid. You start fighting back. So if you think this is the story of a victim, think again. This is how I turned the greatest betrayal of my life into my own beginning. Would you survive if everyone you trusted wanted you gone? People see the Carlyle family and think American royalty, old money, legacy, brilliance. They don't see the cracks running beneath the marble floors, the silent wars hidden behind polite laughter, or the loneliness that can haunt a house filled with light. I was born into privilege, but I earned my place. After losing my parents, I rebuilt Carlyle Innovations from the ground up, turning a fading tech company into an empire. The estate on Lake Greystone became both fortress and prison, a place where the windows glittered, but the shadows grew long. My younger brother, Dylan, was always the golden child. With his movie star looks, a quick smile, and effortless charm, he was adored by relatives, teachers, strangers on the street. But under that charm was something colder, a restlessness, a hunger that nothing seemed to satisfy. I saw it in the way he eyed the family fortune, how he resented every success I built, how every congratulations from him sounded like a challenge. Maya, his wife, was an outsider who adapted quickly. She was elegant, poised, always perfectly dressed, her eyes missing nothing. She became my friend first, before she became family. Looking back, I wonder how much of our closeness was real, and how much was a calculated performance. Then there was Grace, my right hand and the only person I trusted completely. She came to me straight out of grad school, sharp as a blade, loyal to a fault. Grace saw things others missed, a skipped line on a contract, a hesitation in a handshake, the exhaustion behind my eyes. In the world of backroom deals and polite betrayal, she was my compass. Our world revolved around Carlyle Estate, a sprawling lakeside mansion with tall windows, stone terraces, manicured gardens, and a private dock where the family yacht, Infinity Blue, floated like a promise. The estate had seen everything: weddings, wakes, tense holiday dinners, and the signing of a will that would change our lives. That will, after my mother's death, I updated it, equal shares to Dylan and me, but with a stipulation: neither of us could sell the company without the other's consent. It was meant as a safeguard, a promise of unity. I never imagined it would become a trigger for war. Signs of trouble were everywhere, if I dared to see them. Financial reports that didn't add up. Maya's sudden interest in corporate governance, her late-night texts to Dylan. Family meetings that ended with cold silences and too much wine. There were awkward pauses, old wounds left to fester, and a sense that someone was always watching. Still, when Dylan suggested a weekend retreat on Greystone Island, a place for healing, To say goodbye to old grudges, I wanted to believe him. Maybe I was naive, or maybe I was just tired of fighting. Maybe I still hoped my family could be saved. Grace was the only one who seemed uneasy. Trust your gut, Anna, she warned quietly as I packed. People rarely change. Sometimes they just get better at hiding. But sometimes hope blinds you more than fear. And so I said yes. To the private island, the glittering dinners, the laughter that didn't quite reach anyone's eyes. In the world's eyes, we were the perfect family. In reality, we were a house built on secrets, one wave away from collapse. Suspicion, I've learned, doesn't come all at once. It seeps into your life drop by drop, small moments that feel off, words that echo just a little too long, gestures that ring hollow. That weekend, every tiny thing around Dylan and Maya seemed to shimmer with the threat of something more. The day before we left for Greystone Island, Grace handed me a manila envelope, her brow furrowed. I pulled the quarterly numbers again. There are withdrawals from our Singapore subsidiary, $50,000 here, $80,000 there. Each one signed off by Dylan. They were routed through a holding company that doesn't exist on our ledgers. My stomach tightened. Anything legal? Nothing that would stick. Not yet. But it's a pattern. Grace was never alarmist. Her worry felt like a warning siren. That night, alone in my study, I reviewed the records. Maya's name was on some of the internal memos, approving purchases for board consulting. The same day, she sent me a text, "Don't stress about work this weekend. You deserve a break." Anna! The sweetness tasted artificial. For the first time in months, I found myself triple-checking the locks on my office door. The next morning, as the mist rose off Lake Greystone, Dylan arrived early. He seemed excited, bouncing on his heels as staff loaded the Infinity Blue with suitcases and crates of wine. "We need this weekend, Anna. I want us to start over. Family's all that matters, right?" His smile was dazzling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Maya swept into the foyer, radiant in white linen, her dark hair pulled into a perfect chignon. She pressed a kiss to my cheek, whispering, "Let's make some new memories." She glanced at Grace, and for a split second, her gaze hardened, a flash of something fierce and calculating, before she turned away with a laugh. Grace lingered. "If you need anything, call me anytime." Her words were simple, but the intensity in her eyes said more. As the yacht pulled away from the dock, I stood at the stern, the estate shrinking behind us. The lake was glassy and still, but inside me, nerves churned like a storm. On the island, everything was staged for comfort, scented candles in every room, a private chef, a wall of windows looking out onto the silver lake. Maya led a tour with practiced warmth, showing off the renovated spa, the wine cellar, the secret meditation garden. Perfect for letting go of old grudges. She smiled. Right, Anna, but the house felt like a set, too perfect, too curated. There was a subtle chill in every room. That night at dinner, Dylan raised a glass. "To new beginnings," he toasted, eyes lingering on mine. The meal was exquisite, lobster risotto, white asparagus, chocolate torte, but every bite tasted of anticipation. After dinner, Maya suggested a walk under the stars. As we wandered the winding paths, she looped her arm through mine. "Dylan tells me you're considering amending the will, maybe letting us have a bigger role?" Her voice was light, but the question was razor sharp. I kept my tone even. The company stays in the family. We both know how important that is. Her smile froze for a heartbeat. "Of course. But families evolve, right? Sometimes a new vision is what's needed." Later, back in my suite, I opened my laptop to find several failed login attempts on my corporate account. Time-stamped at times, I knew I'd been nowhere near my devices. I changed my passwords again. The following day was bright and beautiful, all sunshine and fresh air. We took the yacht around the island, Dylan at the helm, Maya pouring champagne. At one point, Dylan gestured for me to join him on the upper deck. Alone, he leaned close. You ever get tired of all this? Anna, the expectations, the pressure. Don't you ever wish you could just walk away? His words were soft, but his meaning wasn't. I looked him dead in the eye. This company is our legacy. I'm not giving up. Dylan shrugged. But something flashed across his face, disappointment, or perhaps something darker. That afternoon, as Maya napped, I explored the island's far end, needing space to breathe. I found Dylan talking on the phone, his voice urgent and low. We just need her to sign. She'll be out of the picture soon. Trust me. I didn't confront him, not yet. But a chill settled in my bones. All the little details, the financial anomalies, Maya's probing questions, Dylan's restlessness, the staged perfection of the island clicked into place. I was surrounded by family, but I'd never felt more alone. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the quiet lap of water against the dock, my phone buzzed, a text from Grace. Found more red flags. Call me if you feel unsafe. Trust your instincts. I clutched my phone, staring into the darkness, and wondered, how do you fight for your life when the people trying to end it share your last name? Sometimes, survival starts with a single decision. Don't ignore the signs. The fourth night on Greystone Island arrived thick with summer heat and secrets. The air was heavy with the scent of gardenia from Maya's favorite candles, their flickering light blurring the line between luxury and threat. Every laugh at the dinner table sounded a little too sharp. I could feel the ground shifting under my feet, as if the island itself wanted to warn me. After dessert, Maya excused herself, touching Dylan's arm for just a beat too long. Let's watch the stars from the water, she suggested, eyes darting toward me. Dylan grinned. Great idea. Anna, you coming? A prickle of unease crept up my spine, but pride refused to let me say no. Of course. We boarded the infinity blue under a sky thick with velvet clouds. Dylan took the wheel. Maya poured champagne into crystal flutes, handing me one with a smile just a bit too bright. To new beginnings, she toasted again. To family? Dylan echoed. I sipped carefully, my senses sharp. As the yacht glided away from the island, the world felt small, the water infinite. Dylan steered us into the deepest part of the lake, far from any shore. The only sounds were the low hum of the engine and the distant call of night birds. Maya joined me on the deck, her heels clicking on the polished teak. Isn't it beautiful? Anna, all this because you worked so hard. Her tone was honey, but her eyes flicked to Dylan, who slowed the boat. The silence grew thick. I glanced back and saw him reaching for something in his pocket, a small device. Maybe a phone, maybe something else. Maya leaned in, her voice a whisper. You know, sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go. Maybe it's time to let someone else take care of everything. Before I could answer, Dylan's hand pressed hard into my back. Time slowed. My mind screamed, but my body couldn't react fast enough. He shoved. The world turned upside down, a blur of stars, white-hot panic, and the shocking bite of freezing water. My lungs seized. I clawed for the surface, limbs burning, ears ringing with Maya's practiced scream. Oh my God, Anna, she fell overboard. I surfaced, gasping. The yacht's lights retreated as Dylan turned away, his profile sharp against the dark. Maya hovered at the rail, hand over her mouth, voice trembling for any hidden camera. She was right here, Dylan. Do something. He threw a life ring into the water, too far, far enough to miss me on purpose. He yelled my name, but his voice was all theater. My strength kicked in. I tried to call out, but water filled my mouth, choking the sound. I grabbed for the useless ring, but the current tugged me under. The yacht circled once, engine idling, Dylan's face masked in the shadows. For a moment, I saw them both at the rail, Maya clutching Dylan's arm, eyes wide with feigned horror. I realized then, with piercing clarity, they would report me lost at sea. They would say I slipped, that they tried to save me. They'd already practiced their lines. Panic threatened to swallow me, but instinct took over. I forced myself to float, to slow my breath, to remember every survival lesson my father ever taught me. Don't waste energy. Stay calm. You only have yourself now. Infinity Blue's lights faded. I was alone with the cold and the dark, every muscle trembling. I clung to the hope of my waterproof smartwatch, my only connection, my only hope for a GPS signal if I could get it working. In the numbness, I focused on the stars, on survival. Back on the island, Dylan and Maya called for help with just the right amount of panic. The staff searched the shore. Maya sobbed in Dylan's arms, her mascara perfect, her cries echoing against the stone walls of the estate. They called Grace, told her the news. Anna slipped, fell. They tried everything, but she was gone. Grace didn't believe it. She called the Coast Guard, the police, everyone. She started her own investigation. But for the world, the headlines the next morning were clear. Tragedy strikes Carlisle family, heiress lost on Lake Greystone. As the first pale light of dawn crept over the water, I was still alive, barely. Exhausted, half frozen, I spotted a distant green blink, a buoy, a marker. Using the last of my strength, I swam toward it, clinging to the slim hope someone, somewhere would see. In those endless hours, floating between life and death, my anger burned brighter than fear. I replayed every sign, every warning, every moment I'd chosen hope over suspicion. This was more than survival now. If I lived, it would be to make sure they never hurt anyone again. Because betrayal by family is a wound only justice can heal, and justice, I promised myself, would come. The shock of cold water was a slap from reality, a harsh awakening that I'd been naive to the monsters hiding behind familiar smiles. My arms and legs burned as I thrashed against the lake's waves, every muscle screaming, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Rage was a current all its own, pushing me forward when my body wanted only to surrender. I forced myself to remember my father's old lessons from childhood. Don't panic. Conserve your energy. Think. And the waterproof smartwatch on my wrist was a lifeline. Dylan and Maya had overlooked it, thinking a simple push could erase me. Gritting my teeth, I fumbled to activate the SOS beacon. A soft red light blinked. Somewhere, on the mainland, a rescue alert was triggered. Still, survival is not instant. The hours dragged on. My lips cracked with cold. My mind wandered, memories flickered of holiday dinners, laughter, my parents' proud faces, then Dylan's jealousy, Maya's too perfect smile. I realized, floating in the vast blackness, that betrayal didn't just wound you, it isolated you, made the world feel emptier than death itself. But that emptiness was a test. I clenched my fists, recited every grudge, every warning I'd ignored. The pain, the humiliation, all of it became fuel. I swore, through chattering teeth, that I would not vanish quietly. As dawn crept over the lake, a low rumble caught my attention, the engine of a small fishing boat, its crew blinking in surprise at the bedraggled woman calling for help. They hauled me aboard, wrapped me in thick wool blankets, and stared with disbelief. Anna, the one they said was dead? I nodded. Too weak to speak more than a whisper. Call Grace. She'll know what to do. In the hospital, shivering and covered in bruises, I gave my statement to police and medical staff. recounting every calculated detail, how Dylan and Maya orchestrated my fall, how I'd seen it coming but refused to believe my own gut. Grace arrived, tears streaking her cheeks. She clung to my hand, fierce as ever. I never gave up on you, Anna. I found things. Emails, money trails, voice memos. We huddled over her laptop, piecing together the digital breadcrumbs, Maya's secret transfers, Dylan's late-night calls, insurance policies signed without my knowledge. For every wound, there was a receipt. For every lie, a digital shadow. It was time to stop playing the victim. Time to turn their arrogance against them. As I looked at my reflection, hollow-eyed but alive, I felt something shift. I was no longer a sister or an heiress, or even a survivor. I was a storm they'd never see coming. Because the most dangerous thing in the world isn't betrayal. It's a woman who survives it. There's a moment, after surviving the unthinkable, when fear gives way to pure, cold resolve. For me, it happened in that hospital bed, wrapped in the harsh smell of antiseptic and the thin blanket of disbelief. The world thought Anna Carlisle was a tragedy, a cautionary tale. But they were wrong. I was the evidence they'd never planned for. Grace arrived with coffee, her eyes sharper than ever. "You're trending," she whispered, holding up her phone to show news headlines. Heiress lost at sea. Tragedy at Greystone. They're milking it. Anna, Maya's already set up interviews. Rage bloomed in my chest, but I pressed it down. We're not going to outcry them. We outproof them. We built our war room in the hospital, laptops, notepads, security files spread over the tray table. Grace pulled up screenshots of the shell companies, flagged wire transfers, and cross-checked every date against my accident. Here, she pointed. Dylan sent money to a private account just hours before the retreat. And look, Maya tried to reset your email from the yacht's Wi-Fi. I have logs from the IT team. The digital fingerprint is all over this. Lucas Becker, my attorney, called in via video. Anna, the insurance company, flagged Maya's claim. Too soon, too perfect. We need statements and sworn affidavits. You up for it? I didn't hesitate. Let's get to work. Day and night, Grace and I pieced together the digital puzzle. She coached me for interviews with detectives, prepping me on every receipt, every timeline, every gap Dylan and Maya thought they'd covered. We traced Maya's calls to a lawyer specializing in asset transfers. We found a signed insurance policy dated 3 days before my supposed death. A notary, nervous and apologetic, confirmed Maya and Dylan's signatures. The more we found, the angrier I became, but also more precise. Each receipt was a nail in their coffin. Grace even found voice memos on an old work phone, Maya rehearsing sympathy for the media, Dylan practicing lines about loss and moving forward. I recorded my own statement, eyes direct to camera. This was never an accident. Here's the proof. Lucas arranged a private meeting with detectives and the district attorney. I sat at the head of the table, bruised but unbroken, laying out the case step by step. The shell companies Dylan created, complete with timestamps and routing numbers. The policy Maya filed with forgeries and date stamps. The private emails, the failed logins from Maya's devices. Maya's own words on the audio files, and a timeline that made clear their plan to erase me. For the first time, the officials listened, really listened. One detective, skeptical at first, grew somber as the evidence mounted. "I've seen family betrayals," he admitted, "but never one this thorough or this stupid." Meanwhile, Lucas filed injunctions to freeze company assets and block any change of ownership. Grace briefed the board, who were already wary after months of Maya's charm offensive. And their eyes widened as we laid out the mountain of proof. Still, I wasn't ready to reveal myself to the world. Not yet. Instead, We let Maya and Dylan bask in their performance. The memorial at Carlisle Estate was scheduled for Friday, a spectacle for the media, with photos of me smiling, and Maya in somber black, her eyes red for the cameras. Dylan played the heartbroken brother, hosting donors, shaking hands, and prepping his transition to CEO. The night before the memorial, Grace and I finished the last piece, a dossier for the police, board, and press. It was airtight, with digital copies, sworn statements, and a signed affidavit from the notary. We rehearsed every step, every question, every possible twist. I was nervous, yes. But more than that, I was ready. I wasn't going to hide in the shadows of my own story. Tomorrow, I would walk into that memorial alive and unstoppable, receipts in hand, and show the world that justice isn't quiet, it's loud, and it never apologizes. Because when your whole life is built on secrets, the only way out is through the truth. And this time, the truth would burn brighter than any lie. The morning of the memorial dawned humid, thunder grumbling over Carlisle Estate as if the world itself braced for a reckoning. As Grace, Lucas and I approached the gates, police officers blending among the press, cameras flashing, I felt the strange, electric calm that only comes before something shattering. Today was not just about justice. Today was about truth reclaiming its stage. Inside, the great hall was transformed into a cathedral of mourning, lilies and candles, my portrait smiling over a room of solemn faces. Dylan, perfectly somber in his navy suit, clasped hands, offered condolences, his eyes flicking anxiously to the door every few minutes. Maya, in a black sheath dress, looked heartbreakingly fragile, her makeup artfully smudged. She stood at the podium, voice quivering in all the right places. Anna was more than a sister-in-law. She was the soul of our family, the light that kept us going. The crowd nodded, dabbing tears. Dylan's shoulders shook, whether from grief or nerves, I couldn't tell. I lingered in the shadow of the entrance, listening to the lies, my heart a drumbeat of anger and anticipation. Grace squeezed my arm. "You're ready?" she murmured. Lucas caught my eye, giving the smallest nod. As Maya finished, a hush fell, a silence so deep you could hear the tap of a falling pin. I stepped into the light, chin lifted, pulse steady. Whispers rippled, then erupted. "Anna? Impossible. Is she—" I let them stare, savoring the shock. "Sorry to interrupt. I heard there was a memorial, but it seems a bit premature." The gasp was like a wave. Maya stumbled back, her face pale. Dylan froze, mouth opening and closing. Reporters surged, cameras flashing wildly. I walked to the front. Let's not pretend any longer. I am alive. I am here. And I know exactly what you both did. Maya found her voice, trembling. "Anna, what are you— how we thought you were dead?" I finished for her. "That was your plan, wasn't it? But you underestimated me." I turned to the police, who now stood alert, and to Lucas, who handed over our evidence. I faced the crowd. Everything you just heard was a lie. Dylan and Maya orchestrated my disappearance. For greed, for power, for my company. But they left receipts, so many receipts. It's almost laughable. With a remote, I projected emails onto the big screen, Dylan's transfers, Maya's insurance policy applications. Grace distributed hard copies to the board. The final blow, I played Maya's rehearsed grief speech, recorded on her phone. The room fell silent, horror dawning on even the most skeptical faces. Dylan's mask broke first. He lunged forward, voice shrill. "She's manipulating you. She's always wanted to cut us out. This is all a setup." I met his gaze, steady. "No, Dylan. You set yourself up. I tried to build a family, you built a plot." Police stepped forward, reading Dylan and Maya their rights. Maya's voice cracked, pleading as officers took her arms. "Anna, please, I was scared. Dylan made me. Don't do this." I shook my head. Fear isn't an excuse for betrayal. You both had choices. You made the wrong one. As they were led away, murmurs filled the hall. Some mourners wept in confusion. Others stared, phones raised, already live-streaming the drama to the world. Board members, some relieved, some ashamed, gathered close. Mr. Leonard, the oldest director, pressed my hand. "Anna, we're so sorry. We never doubted your ability, but this was beyond imagination." Lucas, standing tall, briefed the police, passing every last document and digital record. Grace, tears shining, hugged me fiercely. "You did it. You did what no one else could." But even as vindication washed over me, grief pulsed beneath it. I stood by my portrait, remembering the holidays, the laughter, the old hopes for a family unbroken. That innocence was gone. What remained was sharper, stronger, harder won. A reporter shouted above the din, "How did you survive? How did you come back?" I answered clearly. "I survived because I refused to be written out of my own life. I found allies, real family, and I believed the truth would matter if I kept fighting." Applause, hesitant at first, rose among the staff. The board, shaken, reinstated me as CEO on the spot. Grace's promotion to COO was announced as well, cheers echoing in the grand hall. The staff, long trapped in the shadow of family drama, approached, some with hugs, others with simple, tearful gratitude. Outside, thunder rolled, rain washing the estate clean. I walked onto the terrace, the air fresh, heart pounding with exhaustion and relief. The house that nearly became my grave was now my proof. I had survived, reclaimed my name, and faced the ones who tried to destroy me. Alone at last, I watched the clouds part, sunlight breaking over the lake. I let myself feel everything, the loss, the triumph, the knowledge that survival isn't just living through darkness, but demanding the light. For the first time, I was not Anna the victim, or Anna the lost heiress. I was Anna Carlyle, the architect of my own justice. And somewhere in that morning light, I understood sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to disappear. The days after the truth came out were nothing like the movies. There were no thunderous cheers, no satisfying music swelling in the background, just the slow, relentless grind of reality. Carlisle Estate, once bustling with parties and the laughter of family, felt cavernous and cold. Every footstep echoed off marble, reminding me of all that had been lost, all that could never be repaired. The justice system moved quickly, faster than I'd expected. The district attorney took the mountain of evidence, every bank transfer, every forged signature, every damning voicemail and email that Grace and I had unearthed, and built a case so strong even Dylan's most expensive lawyers could only delay the inevitable. The indictment was public, and the city watched as Dylan Carlyle and Maya Carlyle were led out of the estate in handcuffs, mugshots filling the news. People who'd once envied our family now watched with a mixture of horror, pity, and morbid curiosity. Court was an ordeal of endurance. Lucas and I attended every session, my resolve tested by hours of cross-examination, by Maya's team painting her as a victim of Dylan's manipulation, by Dylan's team blaming stress, grief, and even my ambition. I sat through it all, stone-faced, refusing to let the world see just how much it hurt. The facts, cold and irrefutable, won out. When the verdict finally came, the judge's words rang like a gavel in my heart. Guilty of attempted murder, grand larceny, and conspiracy. Sentencing will be severe. When it was over, I didn't feel triumph, just relief, and a heavy, complicated peace. There was mourning, too, a quiet sorrow for the brother I'd once idolized, for the woman I'd called a friend, and for the innocent self who had believed family would always mean protection. That version of Anna Carlisle was gone forever. I made a vow, right there outside the courthouse. I would not let what happened make me bitter. Instead, I set boundaries, no calls, no letters. Maya wrote long, desperate apologies from jail, swinging between guilt and accusation. Dylan called once from prison, leaving a message so small and broken that for a second I almost answered. But I didn't. I knew that holding on to anger would only tie me to a past I needed to escape. So, I rebuilt. Carlisle Innovations weathered the storm thanks to the trust Grace and I had rebuilt with our staff. We overhauled every process, no more unchecked power, no more blind faith. The board implemented real accountability, and Grace, now COO, became my partner in every sense. Together, we restored not just the company's reputation, but its soul. Outside of work, I found ways to channel pain into purpose. I set up a charitable foundation in my parents' memory, focusing on support for those betrayed by family violence or financial abuse. I spoke quietly but honestly at support groups, telling my story, not for pity, but to remind others that survival, and even justice, are possible. Evenings, I would walk the lake shore, tossing stones into the water, watching the ripples stretch and vanish. Each stone was a silent promise to never be blinded by hope again, to trust but verify, to love but not lose myself in the process. People asked, again and again, if I'd ever forgive. The truth is complicated. Forgiveness is not a duty. Some betrayals simply cannot be washed away by time or words. But letting go isn't about excusing the past. It's about freeing yourself from it. My forgiveness was for me, not for them. Justice, I realized, isn't the same as revenge. The law brought safety, boundaries, consequences. My choices brought peace. I watched as Dylan and Maya were sentenced, years behind bars, their futures written by the choices they'd made. There was no joy in it, only the sense that a door had finally, firmly closed. On the day they left for prison, I stood at the edge of Carlisle Estate as dawn broke across the lake. The house was still, the gardens lush, the world turning onward without fanfare. I breathed in the quiet, the promise of a new day. Justice didn't feel like victory or vengeance. It felt like freedom, the chance to write a new story, on my own terms, with no ghosts at my back. Healing, I learned, is not a switch you flip the day justice is served. It's a slow, often silent process, 1,000 small decisions, a willingness to face the ache and let time do its work. In the months after the trial, I often woke from dreams that blended the lake's icy water with Maya's final desperate pleas and Dylan's hollow stare. Some nights, I'd walk the halls of Carlisle Estate, breathing in the silence, daring myself to believe it was finally over. I found comfort in routine. Each morning, I watched the sun rise over Lake Greystone, letting the golden light warm the corners of the house that had once felt so cold. I poured my energy into work with Grace, rebuilding not just the company, but the sense of trust we'd both lost. Together, we started new wellness programs for employees, hosted open forums, made sure everyone felt seen and heard. The staff responded, timid at first, then with growing confidence. For the first time in years, the halls echoed with honest laughter, not secrets. Outside of work, I let myself rediscover old joys. I took up painting again, filling canvases with bold colors, no longer afraid of making mistakes. I joined a book club in town, finding friendship in shared stories and simple conversation. Sometimes I'd sit by the lake shore with Grace or Lucas, talking quietly about the past, sometimes letting the silence say all that needed saying. But the greatest change came inside. Slowly, I forgave myself, not for being fooled, but for loving too much, for hoping too hard. I stopped asking why, stopped replaying every moment for clues I'd missed. Instead, I started focusing on what I could build next. One afternoon, I stood in the estate's garden, hands in the dirt, planting new roses where weeds had choked out the old. It struck me how healing was like gardening, slow, messy, sometimes painful, but full of promise if you keep tending to it. I reached out to others who'd walked similar paths. I shared my story at local support groups, not as a warning but as an offering of hope. People came up to me with tears and gratitude, telling their own stories of betrayal and survival. I saw in them what I'd finally found in myself, not brokenness, but resilience. As the first warm days of spring melted the last traces of winter from the estate, I realized something profound. My story was not defined by what had been taken from me, but by everything I had reclaimed, my strength, my peace, my ability to trust again, slowly and on my own terms. Healing isn't the end of a revenge story. It's the real beginning. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever felt like the world closed its doors and left you standing alone, please know, you are not the only one. My story is just one among thousands. Betrayal by family, by friends, by those you trust most. It leaves a scar that doesn't always show on the outside. But what matters most is not the pain, or even the justice that follows. It's the courage to keep going. To believe that your voice matters, that you have the right to set boundaries, to start over, to heal in your own time, in your own way. If this story touched you, if you found a piece of your own journey in Anna's fight for truth, share your thoughts below. Tell us, what have you overcome? How did you find the strength to reclaim your life? Your story could be the light for someone still searching in the dark. Don't let this be the end of our connection. Subscribe to Heartless Revenge now for more true stories of courage, resilience, and justice served where it's needed most. Each week, we bring you new tales of survival and redemption, reminders that even in the darkest chapters, hope is never out of reach. Ring the bell so you never miss an episode. And remember, in a world full of secrets and betrayal, your voice is your greatest weapon, and your story deserves to be heard. Thank you for watching. This is not just my victory. It can be yours too.